Good afternoon and welcome to Are You Reading, Writer's first, only, and best show about reading. I'm your host, Lisa Jackson. We're joined today by our very special guest, Stephen Newcomb. Good afternoon, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. To start out, what do you consider to be your favorite genre of books and why?
Yeah, so there's two genres of books, fiction and nonfiction. But if you look inside of nonfiction, because I prefer nonfiction, I like anything that has to do with history, economics, politics, anything that has to do with those things really piques my interest.
That's great. Do you find there to be a big difference between reading fiction and reading nonfiction?
Yeah, there's definitely a big difference. Some people prefer one or the other. I prefer nonfiction, but people get a lot of satisfaction out of reading fiction. And actually, how I started reading was reading Stephen King books, and he's obviously a very good fiction author. So yeah, I enjoy both of those things.
So when did you start actively reading for your own enjoyment?
At the beginning of college, I had dabbled with reading, and like every other high schooler, I wasn't interested in it. But then I picked up a Stephen King book, and actually the first Stephen King book I ever read was It, and I loved it, and I was hooked from there. And ever since then, I've just continued to read books.
Have you found there to be a big difference in enjoyment when you're reading books that have been assigned to you versus books that you choose on your own?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that, and I think there's probably some type of psychological thing. Just knowing that I'm being forced or have to read this makes me feel a different type of way about reading those things. But yeah, I think there's definitely a big difference.
Do you think that having assigned readings decrease more non-readers' desire to read on their own?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a turnoff for students in high school. I know when you're forced to read things like Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet, a lot of people just don't like to do those things, and it turns them off for the rest of their lifetime when it comes to reading. So yeah, I think it's definitely it dissuades people from doing that.
And why do you think that people have trouble reading, like reading on their own?
Yeah, I just think people just don't enjoy it. Some people don't have the attention to be able to sit there and read. I know that's a common complaint that I hear from a lot of my friends who don't read. But some people just really just don't enjoy it, and that's just how that is.
And what would you recommend for someone who really isn't into reading, or they keep trying and they just can't find a book where they actually want to sit down and read however many pages on their own?
Yeah, I would recommend Stephen King because I'm biased because that's what began reading. But anything that you think would pique your interest, and then I would say to read at night. It's better to read at night. Read in bed. Read when you're comfortable. Don't try and sit at a table and do something. Get comfortable. Try and read, and maybe you'll begin to like it.
And our final question tonight is, if you could read any book for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
It's a tough question. There's a ton of books that I've read, and I'm sure my answer would change if I could read all the books that I want to read. But if I could read one, I read a biography of Nelson Mandela, and his life was incredible. His story, being in prison and changing an entire country, and being so cordial and forgiving the people who oppressed him. It's an incredible story. He's an incredible leader, and I think that's the book that I would read for the rest of my life.
Well, that's great, and thank you so much for being here tonight, Stephen. And I'm Lisa Jackson. See you next time for another riveting episode of Are You Reading? Good night.